and like people
We're
want
going live.
yeah,
yeah.
I'm fine with live, but yeah, the
Gonna give me a heads up, Dan, when we're recording.
vinyl
We are
takes up
recording, right?
so much space.
We are recording.
We're recording,
Okay,
so they
let me
hear
know
me
when to
say
start.
vinyl takes up so much space.
All right, we're getting the attendees are coming in now, so let's give it a minute or two.
All right, I'm gonna peek at the names. Say hi to people.
Well, hopefully someday again we'll do an event like we did
Alexis,
with
Asia.
one of the guys in town who had organized some of these little readings, and we had authors. And I remember that was the first time I heard Taco Cat, and I thought, geez, they're really good. And they hadn't put their stuff on. I'm like, well, aren't you here to sell your stuff? And they pulled a suitcase out of the van. We started selling their T-shirts and their CDs and everything. They were like, wow. I'm like, why didn't you put it out to start with here? As long as you're performing, I'm pretty sure we'll let you sell your stuff. Anyway, maybe eventually we'll get
Wow,
back to
so
that sort of
many
thing.
people. Hi, people. Look at all those
Give me a big
wonderful
crowd tonight.
people.
But yeah, so okay, so Sarah, have you had anything on vinyl?
No, I have never had anything on vinyl. Now would be the time. Like all my other stuff was made during times when vinyl was in the downswing, and now everyone wants it, but I don't want to store it.
Yeah, and I mean, it just seems like touring in a van with a big crate full of vinyl records.
And you would think they would get hot too.
Yeah, that it seems like maybe vinyl is not the best medium for touring. Like if you're carrying around all the swag yourself.
Right, and it's a pain to ship if you're also shipping.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, having it in local stores would probably be ideal, but you still have to make the commitment.
All right, let's go ahead, Dwayne, and get things started.
All right. Hey guys, welcome everyone. I'm Dwayne from the University Bookstore, science fiction fantasy buyer there, and a few other odds and ends jobs. Tonight we are featuring author Sarah Pinsker, whose new novel, We Are Satellites, is, I consider, a nice sort of quietly creepy novel. It is definitely one that makes you think about technology. And Sarah also is a musician, which I found out for the first time today, and she has, 3 albums out so far? As well as her writing career. What was that?
Yeah, 3 and a fourth one on the way.
All right, and she is going to be in conversation here with Ted Chiang, our local short story jack of all trades. Every time I read a Ted Chiang story, the fun thing is I have no idea what it's going to be about, usually when I start it, because Ted can cover pretty much the whole, every range of science fiction, fantasy, horror I can think of. He usually will write something about it. So I'm going to go away for a while and let you guys take it away. We have signed book plates from Sarah at the store if you want to buy a copy of her new book here. And at some point soon, we'll have some signed copies of Ted's new collections, or 2 collections, excuse me. And we'll be back at the end. Thanks a lot.
Okay. So I think the plan is to start off with a reading from Sarah.
Yeah, I'm going to read to you from a couple of chapters. Not the first one, oddly enough. I'm going to jump right in to the second chapter. So there are 4 perspectives in this book. It's the 4 members of a family, and I'm going to read you from a chapter, one of Val's chapters. She's one of the moms. By the time David started flat out begging, he really was one of only a few boys left at his school who didn't have a pilot. Val had watched it happen at the school where she taught, the sister school to his. If half her students had them by the time class had let out for summer, 3/4 had them when they returned in the fall. She had no doubt his school was equally awash. You're a scholarship kid among rich kids, she pointed out over dinner. You know better than to get hung up on not having something they have. She piled brown rice onto her plate before passing the rest along and helping herself to the next bowl's contents, steamed broccoli. Her health kick put the whole family on a health kick, so as far as she could tell, they were busy resenting her for that too. David sat opposite her, his gangly body rigid with annoyance. The food hadn't reached him yet, and he clenched his empty plate in 2 white-knuckled fists like a steering wheel. Next you say, I grew up with nothing, and that's how I learned I didn't need anything to be happy. As David said the words, Sophie mouthed them along with him, and Julie stifled a laugh. Was she that predictable? But you went to public school, Ma. I'm different already. Why make me even more different? It's not like the surgery is expensive. He must have seen Val cringe at the word surgery because he changed his approach. Whoever heard of parents refusing their kids something that helps them study better? I go to public school, right? Sophie asked. Yes, said Julie, spooning rice onto her own plate, then her daughter's, until you're old enough to go where Ma teaches. Julie passed the rice back to Val, and the rest of the serving dishes made their way around the table to each of them in turn. David relaxed his death grip on the dinnerware to heap rice, then broccoli, then half a chicken onto his plate. They always served him last these days, a forced measure after the night an entire French bread disappeared before his mother's and sister had gotten any. Making more didn't help. His teenage stomach expanded to greet whatever food arrived in front of him. Val had called him BC for a while, for boa constrictor, after she dreamed he'd unhinged his jaw to swallow the whole Thanksgiving turkey. There was silence while they all chewed. Val hadn't been patient enough with the rice and felt mildly guilty about it. She was a decent cook as long as she didn't rush things, but on school nights her poor family ate everything al dente. A moment later, David raised his fork in triumph, a spear of broccoli impaled on the tines. Think of the health benefits, Ma. I'd have more time. I could join the track team. Val exchanged a look with Julie. They'd been trying to get him into some kind of physical activity for 2 years. He'd steadfastly refused to join any clubs or teams. They hadn't pressed as long as he kept up his schoolwork and spent dinner and the hour afterward with the family. Let us talk it over, Julie said. Is that I want to say no, but I don't feel like fighting over dinner, or will you really talk it over? He asked. Sophie giggled. Both, Val said. Time for a new topic. Sophie, how's 4th grade treating you today? My teacher farted during math. Julie's shoulders started shaking. Val tried to hold it together. That's it? Did you learn anything? David grinned. Maybe Sophie didn't, but I guess the teacher learned not to eat beans for lunch. How do you know what my teacher ate for lunch? I know everything, David said, waggling spooky fingers at his sister. She looked impressed. Val glanced at Julie, knowing she too was savoring the moment of normalcy. So that's the moment right before when he's asking to get the pilot. And I'm going to read to you from chapter 7 from David's perspective after he gets his pilot implant. David knew what it meant that his parents had agreed to get him a pilot. Money when they had none to spare, elective brain surgery when his little sister had seizures. As long as he could remember, he'd always felt the responsibility of being the one who didn't need anything from them, who could do what was expected of him without being asked. He'd really truly waited until he was the only one left in his class without a pilot before asking, and they'd seen that too. And even then he'd felt guilty. Which was why, whenever anybody asked, he said he loved it. Those words came easily enough. There were parts of it he did love. The feeling of doing 2 things at once, 3 things, of attention smoothly shifting, carried a euphoric energy that didn't fade. Nobody had told him that it felt good, but it did. Powerful, electric, capable, or more than capable, competent. Studying was less of a chore when you could do other stuff at the same time, and it turned out studying actually made school a little easier. Those were the good parts. All of which made the weird sensation harder to express. David didn't know how to phrase the thing he needed to ask, or who to ask even if he did. He didn't want to bother his mothers, not when he couldn't say for sure something was wrong, not when he'd sworn he needed this, that it was safe, tested, something to give them fewer worries, not more. His best friend, Milo, was the most obvious choice of confidant. They were supposed to be studying for their bio exam, which meant they were alternating 5 minutes quizzing each other with 25 minutes of Forger Heist. Forger Heist had been designed to teach people getting used to new pilots how to maximize the implant's potential. You were supposed to play it while a certain podcast droned in the background, and afterward answer questions about the podcast and the game's details. It wasn't a great game, but on the plus side, it counted as studying. Except it was part of the problem too, or at least it contributed to his feeling that a problem existed. David used part of his new attention to watch Milo. The game had him tense, of course, leaning forward from the waist, both feet on the ground. His left foot tapped an awful non-rhythm, no beat David could count, different from the music on the screen. Now that he'd noticed it, it joined the long list of things he couldn't unnotice. Even with that foot going, Milo exuded control. focused on the game, not on David or their surroundings. He didn't look like he knew there was a fly in the room with them, or that David was watching him. If he knew, he didn't care. "What are you seeing?" David asked. They were in this cliched laser-alarmed room, the same level they'd lost a few times already. You had to track all the laser beams, and there were mirrors throwing everything off, and a steady stream of changing access codes, and a guard, and speed metal that you couldn't turn down blasted from the guard's earphones. And even though the guard was a non-playing character, and there was no real person to think about, you couldn't help wondering how he wasn't completely deaf with his music playing that loud in the room. All of which was the point: overstimulation to get you to focus on the things that mattered. The guard's pattern of alertness, the lasers, the jewel case at the room center, your own steady progress. Except David couldn't shake the nagging feeling he was doing it wrong. This was the first time he'd had the guts to ask Milo. "Shush," said Milo. "I'm almost to the jewels. Get to the access panel." "I'm at the access panel waiting on you. We have 2 minutes before the guard's wife calls and wakes him." It had happened like clockwork the 4 previous times they'd been caught here. "I can't go any faster." "I know, but go faster." Ah, Milo must have miscounted. He hit a laser with his trailing foot. An alarm sounded, and the guard woke and jammed a button, and shutters caged the room, trapping them. "Try again" appeared in block letters. Last time, David had been the one to wake the guard, so he was happy Milo had screwed up this go-round. "We were close." "We weren't even as close as last time. Back to pig organs?" "Yeah, but my question, what were you seeing in that room?" "The same thing I'm going to see when I fall asleep tonight. Laser beams coming from every angle, making me do controller gymnastics I don't know how to do." "What are you hearing? What else is going on?" "They're the codes, but I'm trusting you to deal with those, unless you want to switch. And the dude's music, I guess. Why?" He could say it now or shut up. If he couldn't explain to his best friend, who could he tell? "When I'm in there, the whole room is shouting. Every one of those beams hums at a different frequency. Between that and the music and the podcast and the video, it's like torture." "The video?" "Yeah, the guard watches some warrior race thing on his phone, and even if I don't look at the screen, I hear the announcer shouting in Spanish like it's a soccer match, and the volume is almost as high as the music." "Are you saying you think it means something? A clue we've missed for how to get through the room?" "No, I think it's the opposite. I think it's noise we're supposed to tune out, only it sounds like you have and I can't." He didn't add the other things: the faint sounds of the museum crowd beyond the guarded room, the whisper of air in ducts, the rattle of the one loose screw still attached to the panel they'd removed to enter, the guard's soft snore. Beyond that, David's actual bedroom, the gurgling radiator, the fly trap between the blinds and the window, the scent of whatever his mom was cooking, chili maybe, news television chatterboxes keeping her company. Huh. Now was the time. It's always like this. Is yours? Like what? Loud, noisy, like every single thing needs your attention at once, but not like a wash. Like every single thing is individually and specifically trying to get your attention. Huh, Milo repeated, and he didn't need to say any more for David to know he didn't understand. "Have you told anybody? That doesn't sound right. I pay attention to the things I need to pay attention to. I haven't noticed all the other stuff." "I'm telling you. I thought maybe this is how it's supposed to be, and I'm just bad at it." "I don't know. Either mine is defective or yours is, I guess. Or you're getting used to it slower. Are you doing the exercises they told us to?" "Yeah, but I don't feel like exercises make the difference. Maybe you're right that I'm getting used to it slower." "I don't know. You want to try that room again or quiz each other on pig parts?" "Once more, then back to the pig?" "Deal." David surrendered. He'd tried, but the thing felt indescribable. Like, how did you know if you were seeing colors the same as someone else? How would you ever know if your blue sky was someone else's pink? Maybe he was oversensitive to a thing everyone else had dealt with. He'd do the exercises and learn how to tune it out, the same as they had. The important thing was that he had a pilot, and nobody could tease him anymore, and he could catch up again. The rest was just noise.
Great, thanks. Okay, so so I guess I'm guessing that most of the audience, probably has not read the novel yet. And in the novel, you have sort of an author's note in the back where you talk a bit about a couple things which sort of led you to write the novel. A couple inspirations. And so I was just wondering if you'd like to talk about those right now.
Sure. Yeah. So this came from two things, both of which happened about 10 years ago, actually. One was that I was driving home from work at my old day job when I got stuck at an intersection where there was a private boys' school on one side and a public school on the other side of the intersection, and the cross-country team from the private school was coming past, and it was this huge herd of boys, and they were sort of running in and around the cars because we were all stopped. Um, and a couple boys passed right in front of my car, and one of them tripped, and his friend reached over and just sort of grabbed him and set him right again as he crossed the median, like without even looking over. And they just, like, neither of them even looked at each other. No one said thank you. They just kept running. But it was just this like smooth thing of running boys that went past. And right around that same time, I was sent for my job was information and referral for Abilities Network and the Epilepsy Foundation. Um, and I was going to a lot of epilepsy related events, and there was a symposium by doctors who were talking about all the advances that were going on for epilepsy treatments. And one of the things that one of the doctors brought up was a new implant, and it was a brain implant that she then dismissed and said, but that one isn't actually going to work out after all. It's being used for Parkinson's. It turns out it doesn't work for epilepsy. And she kind of moved on. And I was thinking about, it's one thing if there's something that's therapeutic and you're waiting for this treatment that they've said is coming along, and you say, okay, well, at least it's going to help someone else. And then I started thinking about how frustrating it would be to have the same thing happen, but that it turned out to be something that they found a commercial use for. And so they would, so if a company saw a profit advantage from taking something wide, even if they had to then preclude the very people that it was initially developed to help, that they probably would do that. And I was thinking of how frustrating that would be. So that was sort of, I combined those two things, and that was sort of where it started from. But there's so many times that things have been developed for epilepsy and then either abandoned because they didn't help enough people and the incentive wasn't there to finish working on it. So those drugs get orphaned. That's on the drug side, or just devices that turn out not to help enough people.
And so another thing that you mentioned that I guess that you encountered is the fact that medical devices are not regulated the way that drugs are. Drugs have a very strict approval process, and it turns out that medical devices do not. And which, I think, I think surprises most people who learn about that.
Yeah, it sure surprised me. There were a couple of things that were real eye openers as I trying to decide, like, is this going to be a drug? And I feel like there have been a lot of books about drugs that can enhance your brain. But when I started looking into devices, it was one of those things where the limitations of reality start dictating where your fiction can go, but in great ways. And one of the things I found out was actually there was this whole wild west of devices where things could kind of be, if something was developed and approved for one disorder or one usage, and there was a somewhat similar usage, but they could change it. They could change the device and use the old permission anyway. They also don't have to report adverse effects in the same way. So there are all kinds of ways that things get streamlined for devices to hit the market that are nowhere near as strict as the things about medications that we all have come to know more about with the vaccine process too. We see how carefully they test everything. Devices, they can make a lot of changes and still call it the same device and send it out on the market again.
So, so this novel is not the first time that you've actually just addressed, brain implants in your fiction. And in particular, I'm thinking like one of your earlier stories, A Stretch of Highway, 2 Lanes Wide, also dealt with brain implants. But that story had a very different focus than We Are Satellites. So, so I was wondering, could you talk a bit about, like sort of the different approaches you took, like why, what motivated you to do something different with each one?
Sure. Well, I feel like there's a whole lot of space to write stories about brains. Like there's so much we don't know. There's so much room for manipulation, and just room for cool things for fiction to do between the science that comes along and keeping tabs of things that we're on the cusp of. And my usual playground is the what if, like taking it a few years down the road and just seeing like, who's going to profit from this and who can it help and who can it hurt, that type of question. With A Stretch of Highway, I think I wasn't, it was a technology that felt pretty close, and I think some of it has lapped us, which often happens to me because I write so close to now. But I think it was a little more impressionistic of a story. I decided that I could, like, I feel like the chance of it, it was a not the not as, I wasn't adhering as close to reality. I think, in a way that was a lot of fun to write, but I wasn't as concerned with satisfying the people who would want me to be specific and true to life. But the tech was still close. It was that the thing that happened with the tech fell into a weird gap. And that story got picked up like by science fiction magazines, and then also by like the year's best weird fiction, which I thought was really cool for something that I considered to be science fiction to be picked up by the year's best weird, meant that it had fallen into kind of a cool gap between subgenres.
Because that story is, it's in some ways it's sort of like a benign version of the like the horror story where someone gets a hand transplanted from a serial killer, and then the hand has a mind of its own, sort of. I mean, so
I never thought of that.
but your story is entirely benign, but it is it has that similarity. It has that the idea that that this this prosthesis has its own sort of personality, and it is it's influencing its new host. But so that story is definitely a I guess slightly more fantastical, or it has a crossover with weird fiction.
Right. Someone in the chat said parts of us are not aligned with us, which is actually a good summation of that whole branch of weird and horror, when the part of, because that's the horror thing, right, is that this thing that's supposed to be part of you develops a mind of its own.
And whereas We're Satellites is much more I think aligned with a more, I guess, conventional science fictional extrapolation of brain implants.
Yeah, I was enjoying the restrictions of reality with this book. as I tried to figure out what I wanted it to do, I started with the big ideas first, like, oh, it would be really cool if like this thing could uh, literally let you do multiple things at once. And, like there are all these big idea type brain things you could do. And you see, like, those are the things you tend to see um, in movies. The one that I was thinking about this week was Lucy, where, you know, it lets you use all of your brain, and then what happens when you're finally using all of your brain. Um, and those things always feel false to me, and I kind of wanted to tell a story that was super grounded, not necessarily to be hard science fiction, but that the science was close enough to write to be plausible, and to play with it that way. I mean, there are definitely brain implants. There are already brain implants, and there are going to be more brain implants. And the question of, you know, what will you do is a fun one to play around with.
Just for clarification for our audience, I think you were talking about Luc Besson's film Lucy, starring Scarlett Johansson,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is, I guess kind of fun, but largely nonsensical.
Right.
So, okay, so We Are Satellites has these 4 viewpoint characters. David, who is enthusiastic about getting a pilot, and his sister Sophie, who is not eligible for it because she has epilepsy. And then you have their 2 parents, their 2 moms. Julie is very enthusiastic about the possibility of a pilot. And Val, the other mom, she is skeptical. She doesn't get a pilot, partly, I think, in solidarity with Sophie, but also she is skeptical about the technology. And so while I think you do a good job of depicting all of them sympathetically, I'm going to guess that you are most closely aligned with Val, if only because you wrote this novel, and I think this novel sort of evidences a kind of skepticism about brain implants. Is that fair?
That's fair. I think it was fun to write Julie because I'm not that person who jumps right, like she's the like ultimate new adopter. Like she wants everything new first, and wants to play with the new technologies. And it was fun to get into that head and write it. But um, and I thought she did a pretty good job of saying like why you would do this. I'm hoping, but it is interesting to, yeah, it was an interesting head to step into because it's definitely not mine.
Well, and it's funny because coincidentally, someone has just mentioned in the chat an article that I was going to bring up, which is the recent New Yorker article about do brain implants change your identity? And you've read this article.
I have.
And so I guess one of the things that was interesting in that I thought was interesting about that article was that that article talks about this kind of a implant which does deep brain stimulation as a treatment for Parkinson's, and it mentions that like a fair number of people, the device seems to be pretty successful at treating Parkinson's, but a fair number of people they experience personality changes after getting the device implanted. They fair number of them have they get divorced, and there are a couple lines in that article which like there's this one line. It's like, many people reported that the person they were after treatment was entirely different from the one they'd been before. And one patient, it says like, she was unrecognizable to her family. They told her they grieved for the old her, which I thought was pretty interesting, because those are, I don't think that there's any, I don't think that under any ordinary guidelines, those would not be considered failures. You know, the patient, it treated the Parkinson's, tremors, it works as intended. And, so as far as everyone's concerned, the patient is okay with it. The doctors are okay with it. It's just like the patient, has undergone some personality changes.
Right.
And yeah, so so that's something which, I think to us, we think like that's kind of, disconcerting, but probably doesn't even qualify as, like an actual failure.
Right. I don't think that would be an adverse event necessarily, and you don't have to report them. Well, I mean, so you can report it, but the company doesn't have to report it. So, but that's not the device failing in any concrete way. And the other thing that's in that article that was fascinating to me was the part about the device that was used for seizures, that was highly successful for some of the people who used it, and it was telling them when they could expect to have a seizure, which changes your life if you're constantly living without knowing and worrying about, like, you know, will I have a seizure while I'm on the bus? Will I, like, someone could rob me? Someone, will I remember things when I get up? Like, it takes me a while to remember. There are all these worries that you would have. And this woman was experiencing all kinds of freedom from now being able um, to know, like, I think in the article it said, like, she was at the hairdresser and it said that like her app told her, her brain was telling her she was going to have a seizure, and she just left the hairdresser and went home and had the seizure in bed. And then the company went out of business and called her and said, we're going to have to take that out of your brain because we can't actually manage it anymore. We're not going to be able to, follow up if anything is wrong, and so we're just going to have to take it from you again. Yeah, so that article was fascinating.
Yeah, that article, I mean, that specific issue where, like, the end of support for a product, that seems like a, yeah, that's a big drawback to any sort of brain implant, as opposed to, say, wearing a helmet. If they could do, if they could do something with a helmet, that'd be entirely different, because, like, yeah, you lose support for the helmet. It's like, all right, that's that's disappointing, but you don't have to go back in for surgery, for them to take it out.
Right, and you don't have to go. She also went through all that without counseling, so, like, learning to live the other way again without any of the support for coping with that.
Yeah. But so, but yeah, I guess, that's sort of an interesting scenario, or I guess to the thing that I was mentioning before about the personality changes, because that might not be considered an adverse effect, because the patient themselves, they might be, they're happy with it. They don't. But yeah, that poses sort of an interesting question for people who are considering getting one, because it's like, like, you can say, like, this product actually works. It actually does, it will cure your problem. It might change your personality, but you're not going to mind.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something interesting. The spot where I put the pilot, which I did after consulting with a whole bunch of people who knew better than me, where exactly I should put it in the brain. So I put it in a spot that has to do with shifting attention, so that you can switch. So it is akin to multitasking. It's the spot that lets you smoothly shift between different tasks. But what I didn't go into the book is it's also the spot. It's a spot that's associated with theory of mind, so that you can your feeling of recognizing that other people have feelings and thoughts and desires of their own. And so it's associated with like sympathy and empathy also, which I didn't go into, but maybe is layered in there a little bit, as a question of whether that would actually work as well. But yeah, it's an interesting spot, that it can do those two things.
Because yeah, I mean that would be interesting. Because yeah, the pilot as depicted, kind of supercharges their ability to shift the person's ability to shift attention. But if it likewise supercharged their ability to say understand other people, yeah, that would be that would be a super interesting side effect. So
Here's a
just
question. There's a- I was
uh,
gonna turn it on you and ask, would you get a pilot? You outed me as a Val, so now I want to know.
I'm no, I well, it's one thing, brain surgery does not appeal to me. Uh, um, I'm going to be fairly conservative and say that uh, I'm not going to opt for brain surgery unless I have exhausted all other options. Yeah, I don't want anyone drilling a hole in my skull unless unless there are no other alternatives. So so the pilot as depicted, that would not be for me. But yeah, I guess the maybe the broader question is, like if there's a helmet or if there's a drug or something, uh, um, you know, uh, those I'd be certainly more open to, but I guess I would also be kind of I think I'm fairly cautious about that sort of thing. Okay, so I think that it's pretty easy for us to imagine futures which are not so good that involve brain implants. We we can pretty easily see things going in a not great direction. And but yeah, so like what I'm wondering is like, can we imagine a positive future that does include the regular use of brain implants? Is such a thing possible? And if so, what would that look like? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think I tried to explore some of the good sides too. And I mean, I think ultimately I fall on the side of caution, and so they're not in there as well. But um I think that there are things to be said for it. Like I mean, if you're talking about my specific one here, uh, there are advantages to having being able to shift attention like that. It could be one of the stories that I wrote that, like as I was working with the idea. It's a story that's in a, an anthology called Accessing the Future. But that one's about one of the early people who was in the trials for the pilot, and she ends up going to work as like an EMT, and like I can see that there would be jobs where being able to do this sort of thing would be genuinely helpful. And I know, I mean, at the time that I was writing it, the job that I was working in, I wore a lot of hats. I was working on epilepsy legislation. I was working on I was the person who did like press releases. I was running a couple of grants that people could access, and I was doing some case management. And then on top of that, the phone would ring every 5 minutes, and someone would call with a question that I would either know the answer to or look up an answer. And I was constantly constantly having to shift, and I do not have a pilot, and so it would be a constant reframing back to this, back to this, back to this, and then getting pulled away and then back to this. So I could see I could see that sort of thing being genuinely useful, in if it could truly, without without downsides, help you maintain focus while being called to a million things, because that happens to all of us every day. Um, I could see like some of the other ones that we've seen in other like media as well, boosts. I don't know. Like the one that always comes up is like a Siri for your brain. I don't know if I want that intrusion. And I feel like there would be ads. Um,
Well, so because so one of the things that say Elon Musk uh, has said about he's working on a product Neuralink. But one of the things that he has said, and what other people have said, is that people in the future might need these enhancements to their brain in order to remain competitive, in order to be able to keep a job. Like especially if they're facing competition from like artificial intelligence. And to me, I feel like that is to me, that is not a good future, because that is a future where people are under relentless pressure to be ever more productive. Because of the because they're being ground by the wheels of capitalism. And so I think that like if I imagine a world in which people have say universal basic income, or like there's very strong regulations about job security, so so then you don't have to worry about that, like because I think that removes, I think, many of the use cases that Elon Musk is imagining. And so so I guess what I'm wondering is like what in like in a world that I, as a kind of liberal leftist, would think of as like, oh, like a positive future, like what role do brain implants have there? Like and it's I'm not sure.
yeah, I mean, I just gave you my best case scenario, but the second you start poking at it, like those economic questions do come up. The questions of how is it going, like that best case scenario of it's going to go to the the doctors and the EMTs and the nurses and the the people who genuinely need to shift, like, or whatever it is that it's doing. That's not what it's going to be used to do, and that's not yeah, and you're right that the economics of it will be that it'll be used just to push people into higher and higher demands on productivity, which is what's in the book. But
Yes. And so I'm going to say that to our audience, that the lesson is vote for universal basic income, and very strong worker protections to avoid the dystopian brain implant future.
indeed, and whatever Elon Musk is selling, don't buy it.
Okay,
not
so
talking about the cars. I'm not actually talking. I mean, like, do what you want with the stuff he has right now. I'm just saying, like, hold off on the brain implants.
We've got about 15 minutes left, so let's go ahead and get to some of these questions.
Okay, so right before we go to audience questions, we're going to do a lightning round of I'm going to quiz Sarah on some trivia. So Sarah, my sources tell me that you are a big fan of the movie Labyrinth, and that you were a big fan of the that's a type of Wonder Woman.
I'm glad it's Wonder Woman, because I was a little worried
Sorry
about Wonder
that.
Man.
That's but okay, so we're gonna quick trivia questions. So in the movie Labyrinth, how many hours does Sarah have to solve the labyrinth before her brother is turned into a goblin forever?
13.
Correct. What's the name of the song that plays during the masquerade ball?
Oh no. I am going to forget, but this is going to be right on par because I forget things to do with songs all the time, including lyrics. It's playing in my head. The World Turned Upside Down is from Hamilton, but As the World Falls Down.
As the World Falls Down.
Thank you, Cliff.
Correct.
I got close. Right.
Who was the choreographer for the film?
Was it Gates McFadden?
Correct.
All right.
Better known as Dr. Crusher from Star Trek Next Generation. Where is the Hoggle puppet now?
I know that something horrible happened to it, but I think it was recovered. So I'm going to say it wasn't completely destroyed in a fire. Like I know something happened for a long time. Maybe the Museum of the Moving Image. Something bad happened. I know that.
It's actually in the Unclaimed Baggage Center in Alabama. Yeah, it was lost. It was lost luggage, and then
Right.
And it was badly damaged, and they restored it, and now it is a showpiece in the Unclaimed Baggage Center.
I would like to know who your sources were on giving me this quiz, but we'll keep going first.
Okay, and then okay, then Jareth's Magic Dance song borrows lines from which Cary Grant movie?
I mean, the lines are like, "You remind me of the Babe, what Babe," but I don't actually know what movie it's from. I'm going to, Night and Day is Cole Porter, and I don't think it's a Cole Porter line, but I don't recognize any of those other movies, so I'm going to say Night and Day, even though, how'd I do?
No, it is The Bachelor and the Bobby Sox Show.
All right.
Okay, so now we're shifting to Wonder Woman.
All right.
The creator of Wonder Woman, William Moulton Marston, is credited with inventing what machine?
The lie detector.
Correct. What famous science fiction writer wrote issue 203 of the Wonder Woman comic, in which a depowered Diana fights a department store owner who is paying women less than minimum wage?
I don't know that, but no, I have no clue, and I'm curious.
Samuel R. Delaney.
That is awesome. I was gonna guess you, Scott, just for fun, but all right. I know you worked for Marvel, so I know it wasn't you.
Okay, so before Linda Carter played her in the TV series, who played Wonder Woman in the 1974 TV movie?
I don't know that either.
Kathy Lee Crosby, who went on to host That's Incredible.
Excellent.
Who played Diana's younger sister, Drusilla, aka Wonder Girl, in the TV series?
Deborah Winger.
Correct. In 2011, NBC ordered a pilot for a new Wonder Woman TV series. Who played Diana in that unaired pilot?
The actress from Friday Night Lights, whose name I'm gonna forget.
We'll give it to you. That's Adrienne Palicki. She was also in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yes.
Okay, and then final bonus question, connecting the two. What connects David Bowie from Labyrinth to Wonder Woman? What connection is there between the two?
Other than me.
Yes, other than you and the many people who like both.
I don't know that answer either, but I'm very curious.
David Bowie's wife, Angela Bowie, auditioned for the role in 1974.
I didn't know that.
Okay. So.
What did I win?
Okay, so now we will, Dwayne, I'm going to turn it over to you to pick out questions from the audience. Dwayne, are you there? Okay, Dwayne is not here.
I will go ahead and start with Dwayne gets around. There was one question here. Since you're a musician, how would having a pilot change lyric writing? That was a great question.
Oh, that's fascinating. I mean, physically, it doesn't approach any place that has anything to do with lyric writing. So I would think it wouldn't bother that. But in terms of distractions, it would be really, I think different people write lyrics differently. So I'll answer, how would it affect me? I usually sit down to play guitar and then I get distracted by 500 things. And maybe this would allow me to do those things, but also keep working on the lyric that I'm playing with. Good question.
Dwayne, you're muted. Dwayne is muted. All right.
Let me go with another one then. Can you talk about Can you talk about your creative process and influences, and how does going back and forth between the music and fiction writing impact your art?
Yes, this might also be a place where a pilot would come in handy, because I do not shift very easily. We can say that I am a musician and a writer of fiction, but the truth is that the more fiction I write, the less chance I have had to write songs. The only song I've written this year was for a story called Where Oaken Hearts Do Gather, that's in Uncanny Magazine, where I wrote both the song and the story, and then I recorded the song just for fun. Um, but generally speaking, I have had way less time to do music since I started writing fiction, particularly since I started writing fiction for deadlines. I'm trying to find a better balance because I miss music a whole lot.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, computer was giving me some issues. Molly Gloss wants to see Sprocket.
Um, Sprocket is hold on. Zoo will get him. That is an
Okay.
excellent question. We can ask the next question, and he will make his appearance on my lap and probably look very tired and sideways.
Okay, there's one question that they want to know. How did you approach showing the pilot's impact on characters' thoughts and personalities in sections that were from the perspective of those with the implant, like David's?
Uh-oh, I'm gonna have to hear that question again. Here is the puppy.
Yeah.
He says hello. His
Oh,
tongue
there's
is out
Sprocket.
because he was asleep. So you get the
He's
full
like,
tongue effect.
why am I
He's
here?
like, yeah, what is going on here? Thank you for that excellent question, Molly.
So they want to know about how are you going to approach showing the pilot's impact on the character's thoughts, their insight, inner monologue, shall we say, that had the implant versus, I guess, those that don't, maybe. Like David has it, and how does it affect?
I had so much fun writing David. David is like, because David has the pilot, and particularly because David's pilot, he feels that it works differently from others. And he was the one who I put off writing forever. I actually wrote all three of the other parts, and I was trying to write around writing him. And eventually I had to acknowledge that I had to actually pay attention, that I actually had to find a way to get his story in there too. And when I did, it actually fixed everything that I, like, everything I'd been struggling with about the novel came right when I finally acknowledged I needed to write David. Um, Writing him was a really physical process, was the interesting thing also. Like, I had to kind of like over caffeinate. I had to stand up to write him, kind of like hanging over my computer. Like it felt like a forward momentum thing. I had to write him differently, but he was a lot of fun to write.
I want to paraphrase this question. So I was thinking back when Google had Glass, that was going to be the next big thing, and we'll see something of that sort in the future. But did you think about why the implant is visible? If they could be made invisible instead, would it have totally changed your story?
Yes,
I mean,
so
if
the
the
pilot,
pilot is not a
right, it's got a little blue light, and the reason it has a little blue light is marketing, it's branding. Um, it's because they want people to be able to see at a glance that everyone's doing it. And what I was thinking about was actually the early iPod ads, where there was like a block of color and there was a silhouette on it, and then there were the white headphones. And after that,
Hmm.
you associated the white headphones with someone who had an iPod and then an iPhone, and they had the thing that they wanted everyone to have. And there was this like very clear, um, like their products were like right there and you knew it. So I wanted that same thing where you knew at a glance who didn't have it, and therefore everyone would be pressured to have it. Because we also go into like the questions of, you know, who gets left behind in that case. If employers can't discriminate against you for not having the pilot, but they see a blue light on the head of one person and not on the head of another person, you know, who are they going to go with if they think that this person will be a more productive worker? So that's all branding. It's, yeah, it's
okay. Jordan's wanting to know about expanding technology of medical sectors. Is it worth the price we'd pay? He talks about spinal cord injuries are showing some signs that they could be partially or fully restored. He's got a link to the New York Times article about it, but I wonder if you thought more about other types of implants, more mental and physical approaches to where we could end up, I guess, in the near future, not way down the pipeline. I think of
Yeah,
Effinger.
yeah, Ted, if you want to answer that too, feel free. I I mean, I think there's all kinds of playgrounds to play in, both in real life and in books. There are, we're seeing constant um, jumps ahead in technology, in medicine, and I think part of the question is if ethics can keep up, like if companies have ethics officers, and theoretically those people are supposed to say when they think there might be a problem, but they also, they should be hiring us, the science fiction writers and the futurists, to look maybe a little bit farther and say, well, here are the ways it could also go wrong, because there are all kinds of things that you see, and sometimes you have to wait and say it could go wrong, but on the other hand, look at these things it can do and decide whether it's something worth it.
One of your fans asked for more a lightweight question there on the list. Wants to know if you prefer the English or American cover, and says it's okay. You can trust us not to blab about it. Apparently, they want to know which cover you prefer if you wish to make a statement on that.
Oh, which
So
cover?
the American or the English cover of your new book?
I have to say, I
Sorry.
love them both for different reasons. You can this is the British cover, it's the hardcover, so there'll be another one for the paperback, and that's the American one. And that's the first time I've ever done that so smoothly. Usually I get confused.
Very good.
I like type. I tend to like type-based covers the best. But in this case, I absolutely love with what they did with it. So I can't decide, but I generally prefer typeface covers with like cool fonts and mostly words and leaving things to your imagination. But I felt like that cover left things to your imagination, like the pair on the cover isn't strictly representative of any particular scene or even any particular people, but it also has a feel that I really like, and I love the colors. And on every table that I've seen it on so far, like at the bookshops where I've been able to like sign or see pictures of them, like it jumps out. So I'm really happy. Both of those would jump out. So yeah.
Dwayne, we've got time for about one more question.
When we go this one, the first character we know in the book that we see get a pilot is an adolescent. I was curious if that was deliberate, and if you thought about the impact of it on an adolescent brain versus a fully adult brain.
Yes, the book goes into that some as well, but I figured that it would be an early adopter thing, that they figured they would go with the influencers, and so they were going with young rich kids to start getting to their peers so that other people would want it too. Um, and I figured that would be a pretty good route if you ignored the fact of the adolescent brain, which is a big question in reality, and which it addresses somewhat. But there's and I know this will take, hopefully I can get this in here, but there's a sort of false thing that's happening here where they are setting up these lines and saying, someone with these certain disorders can't get this. But if you have a normal brain, we all know there's no such thing as a normal brain. If you have a normal brain, then you can get it. But there are plenty of brain disorders that don't develop until after adolescence, and there are plenty of everyone's brain is a little different. So they were drawing lines. I think the company draws the lines based on litigation and what they think they can get away with to some degree. And I think that they can put it into adolescent brains, and because of where it is and what it's specifically stimulating, I think they've done the math and they think it'll be okay.
Okay, I think we pretty much run out of time. I'd like to thank everyone for attending. This should go up on our YouTube page in a few days. I'm not sure how long it takes exactly, but we put these up there eventually. Sarah, thanks a lot. I've been reading the book. It's been fun. I'm looking forward to seeing how it's going to end. Ted, is always a pleasure. I always look forward to your talks. Anybody else has anything to say?
I just want to say thank you to everyone who's here. Thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry I can't see all your faces, but I did go through all of your names, and I'm really happy to see you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.